Well, hi everyone. There was a pretty interesting yet alarming situation that occurred in midtown Manhattan yesterday on July 7th, 2026. I'm recording this video on July 8th. And a high rise building, it was the former Pfizer world headquarters that was built in 1960. That those buildings, there's more than one there, were being converted to residential apartments. Some workers had noticed that some structural steel columns near the building windows had buckled, that is, failed, such that they were no longer able to carry the loads from the overlying building floors. In fact, there was sagging of floors between floors 21 and 26. You could see in the photos that a lot of the interior metal studs for walls had also bent quite a bit due to the floor sagging. So, as a precaution, emergency responders, the fire department in New York, and police evacuated a several block area around this building. So, I'm going to go through what may have caused this problem and what the likely fixes are going to be. Let's just look at some of these pictures. You can see the buckled structural steel column. It looks white because it has spray applied fireproofing. You see a lot of stored materials, these cable reels. Wondered if stored materials in the upper floors could have contributed to overloading of the building, but I think it's just probably an issue with the overall design and construction of this building expansion. This is the location of the building, 235 East 42nd Street, Midtown Manhattan. It's caused a major disruption due to the closure of nearby roads and evacuation of nearby buildings. So this new project involves the vertical and horizontal expansion over the existing building that was used for the Pfizer World Headquarters. You can see a 19-story extension and a 4-story extension. You can see the ironworkers installing steel for the upper level additional floors. So there's really two buildings that have been combined, 235 East 42nd Street, where this failure occurred of the structural steel elements, and then 219 East 42nd Street. So 4 stories were added to the former 33-story building at 235 East 42nd Street, and 19 stories were added to the existing 10-story building at 219 East 42nd Street. This is the location of all the buildings nearby that were evacuated. Now, there's a lot of information on this website, Collaborative Construction Management LLC. They list the developer as Metro Loft Developers, the architect as Gensler. You have an MEP, engineer, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, because these retrofits require massive amounts of penetrations in the floors and the walls for heating, air conditioning, ventilation, lighting, try and create pathways for natural light to penetrate the building. Structural engineers listed as GACE. Plan was to produce a total of 1,602 residential units. Supposedly 25% of those were allocated to be what they call affordable housing. Now, as of this recording, the building appears to have reached equilibrium again after this movement. Reported movements were up to 4 inches, apparently, with some of these floors between floors 21 and 26. The building department there in New York was monitoring deflection of these floors remotely from adjacent buildings. They were, I suppose, using LiDAR and other optical devices to measure deflection of the floor. Apparently, the problem with the structural steel columns was observed around 8 a.m. on July 7th. And as of noon yesterday, they really saw no additional movement. So this happened rather quickly in the morning hours of July 7th. And since that time, they've deemed the building uh, stable, as I've mentioned, and they're implementing the installation of shoring, which I'm going to come back to stabilize the floors that had moved. But this developer is quoted in the New York Times making some pretty ridiculous statements, in my opinion. Let's just go through that real quick. And this is a statement from the developer Nathan Berman, where he's quoted as saying, "This incident is nothing more than a typical construction mishap." Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, it's not a situation of catastrophic collapse, obviously, but this is a major impact to midtown Manhattan with the building evacuations and road closures. And I think they're looking at a massive additional expense to stabilize the building. And there could be follow on impacts with decreased desirability of these units in the future. So I don't know if they're going to get the kind of money that they were hoping to for the 75% of the units that were not designated as affordable. Burbage goes on to say that he believes that the structural steel columns in the building were likely not adequately reinforced. And he mentions that the rest of the columns of the building and the floor picked up the weight, which is true. That's the beauty of a structural steel building. There's a lot of redundancy so that if one or more members lose their load carrying capability, that load is distributed to adjacent members, which clearly is what happened here. Floors above then sagged up to 4 inches, according to measurements Mr. Berman said he received from his team. He said there was never any risk of collapse. I don't know that a 4-inch sag is a collapse, he said. I would agree with that. It would be characterized as building distress, I think. But here's an image from the fire department in New York. They used their drone to get a close-in shot. You can see the white spray applied fireproofing. It looks like it's spalled off this structural steel column, but there looks to be a lot of corrosion on this structural steel column. So I would be concerned about that. They may find that there's widespread corrosion of these steel columns throughout the building, that they could have a much bigger problem on their hands. You can see here's the location of that buckled member. Looks to be some tilting or sagging of these floors. As I mentioned, this expansion involved both a vertical and horizontal expansion of overlying floors. So it makes me wonder generically what the possibilities could be that led to this problem, this failure of some of these structural steel columns. It could be an issue of a design, just a simple design error. It could be that someone assumed that the structural steel members were in much better condition than maybe they actually are due to corrosion or other factors. Also, generically, you'd have to wonder if there were any construction errors, whether there were building support members that were removed or relocated or had not been properly reinforced, or it could be an issue of construction sequencing, that the construction activities may have been appropriate, but they may not have been executed in the appropriate order to avoid problems like this. So I have no doubt that engineers, many of them, will be involved with this evaluation and repair effort. First, they've got to start by installing shoring, because these buckled structural steel members are no longer able to carry their loading. So that loading has to be taken up by installation of additional support. And you can see this example for a bridge in Idaho where a train derailment took out a bridge column and they came in with the shoring towers. These will be much larger than what they will use in this building, but I suspect there'll be an extensive amount of shoring throughout the building. And I'm not sure what they're going to likely do in an effort to recover the 4 inches or so of floor slag that may have occurred here. But I think they've got a big challenge on their hands. The building isn't in danger of a catastrophic collapse. Otherwise, they wouldn't have started reopening traffic in nearby roadways there and wouldn't allow people in to install shoring and to do an evaluation. So I think the big concern has been alleviated, but they've got a big mess on their hands going forward, I think, in terms of additional costs and significant schedule delays to the building. In fact, that Berman was quoted as saying that he thought that the delay in the project would only be about a couple of weeks, and I doubt that very much. So I'll continue to follow this story. I appreciate all of you who left comments to the community post about this building issue that I made yesterday. A lot of great feedback there. So I'll continue to follow this story and post updates as we go. Thanks very much, everyone. I'd like to send a shout out to those of you who've contributed to buy me a coffee. That's one of the better ways to support this channel. I also want to thank the channel members and those of you who've contributed to Super Thanks. Thanks very much, everyone.